people don't already know this. Some people do. But I don't think that people realize what is asked of their police officers nowadays, whether they're responding to somebody experiencing homelessness, somebody with substance use disorder or alcohol use disorder or a mental health issue. It's not as easy as it used to be. It's very gray all the time. We demand a lot of our police officers. So you want them to respond to those calls. You also want them to stop cars. You also want them to be proactive to prevent crime. It's a lot.
Well, Sanford Police Chief Eric Small, thank you very much for joining us in studio. I'm grateful for you to come and give us an interview and help us learn a little bit more about policing and some of the issues that Sanford's facing. I think Sanford's an undercovered city in the state of Maine, because when you think of Maine cities, you think Bangor, Portland, Lewiston, Auburn, not necessarily Sanford. And even people in Maine, I think, would be surprised to realize how big of a city it is and how fast it's growing. And I was appreciative that you reached out with an op-ed about some of the policing issues that you're facing, some of the constraints that are being placed on you by politicians, by the legislature. And I think really my first question, anytime someone in law enforcement speaks out openly about the kind of things that you were speaking about, is are you worried about the political blowback or recriminations or retaliation on the political side? Because in my experience, there's a strong culture of fear of retribution in this state for employees of state government, local government, county government, who are willing to speak out in a way that's critical of the status quo or the power structure.
Hey, first of all, thank you for having me. I do appreciate it. Now, that's a big question. I never really worried about that at all, actually, because I didn't write this really from my heart. I took it from the community perspective. I would never really have had to write it if these things didn't exist. And a lot of it came from feedback I got from the community, emails, telephone calls about what the people that live in Sanford are seeing. And really, I truly believe that those are the people that we work for. And if we're not listening to them and my decisions aren't based on their needs, then I'm really not doing my job. Plus, feedback from officers in our department and the frustrations they're seeing on the street. So I'm not going to tell you I never didn't think about what the unintended consequences might have been from writing it. But to say I worried about it or concerned about it, no, I never was, because I also had the support of from my boss, my city manager, and I know the people of Sanford support what we're trying to do in Sanford with policing and how we're trying to keep our community safe. And I feel like if I have the support of, if I'm surrounded by those people, then that's kind of a good defense for me as far as that goes.
And so you've been chief now for 8 or 9 months of the department. How big of a department are you running, and what would you say are the biggest issues, policing issues facing your department?
Yeah, I would say for Maine, we're a large department. We have 43 full-time officers, 50 employees within the agency itself, including civilian staff. And the things that we're faced with now in the current policing climate is often not police work. Some would say it's social work. Some would say it's mediating non-police matters. We're faced with trying to navigate people experiencing homelessness. We're trying to navigate people with substance use disorder and a mental health crisis we have right now in our state. We at the Sanford Police Department about 5 years ago formed a mental health unit to focus on just those things in our community. And that was driven, again, by the community who saw these problems, and we just needed to find a unique way to address it. Portland's had that for a long time, and they were successful in their outreach. So we started a unit and hired a social worker for our department and assigned a couple officers to co-respond to those type of calls. And then we found ourselves doing a lot of outreach, and honestly, the work became overwhelming, and we couldn't keep up with the services we were trying to provide. We're not social workers. we're not mental health professionals. Yes, do we have training in it? Of course we do. But the police nowadays, in my opinion, are being called upon to do so many different jobs, and it's just a matter of time before something's going to go wrong or we're going to make a mistake, because we're police officers. We're supposed to fight crime, and we find ourselves fighting other situations in our community.
The opioid epidemic, I think everyone in Maine knows that it's a big problem, but it's just we've almost just reached a status quo where the solution seems to be to make Narcan as broadly available as possible so that overdoses are survivable. Every once in a while, you'll hear about kilogram-sized busts, but it seems like drugs are still readily available. And if you go to major cities, you can see people obviously strung out in the streets. We've been to the homeless camps, or I would say the public spaces where drug users use in Bangor, in Portland, in Sanford, in Lewiston, and you can see needles everywhere. So I think that it'd be very, very difficult to argue that Maine's response to the opioid epidemic over the last 6 years has been successful. We've passed out a lot of needles, and we've made overdoses more survivable, but we haven't, I think, reduced levels of addiction or the property crime that spirals out from addiction and, the other unintended, perverse consequences of allowing drug networks to proliferate in your state. What do you think we could do to improve our policies around the opioid epidemic? I know Sanford, we were talking before we started recording, has moved back to the 1-to-1 needle exchange requirement, which was changed during COVID for some reason. We changed it to a 0 to 1,000, just handing out needles. We don't even have exchange clinics anymore. We have distribution centers. We just hand out needles. But Sanford is back to 1-to-1. Are there other changes that you think that we could make with regard to our opioid policies that would be effective at reducing addiction and reducing actual drug trafficking rather than just making overdoses more survivable?
Yeah, first, let me say, I do think that our state had its heart in the right place when, they started combating this situation 5-6 years ago to reduce deaths. That was the number one goal. And we have been successful in that. Obviously, with flooding the communities with Narcan, we have dramatically reduced deaths. If that is our only focus, and if that is what we're gauging success on, we've been successful. However, in my opinion, you have to look at it a little bit more broadly. Of course, we don't want people to die. Our job in public safety is to save lives. But at the same time, what are the other consequences? You can't swing so far one way and not think about the other people in your community that have unattended consequences, like the child playing in the park that may come across a needle, may get stuck with a needle. The mom and the mom and child that wants to use our park, but they can't because there's somebody doing open drug use right there with a needle sticking out of their arm. And the police, of course, can't be everywhere at once. So what I'm seeing in my community are things like that. And I'm asking, and the reason why I wrote this op-ed was to start a conversation so that the government would come back towards the middle a little bit and think about the people that have to live in the community where, needles are given out, as many as you want, like you said. Sanford switched back to the 101 because after cleaning up one of our homeless encampments, I don't have the exact numbers, but the city manager identified them in a meeting. We collected so many needles, and our city, our citizens, and our city council just said enough is enough. And we went back to the 1-to-1, and we've seen less needles on our streets, less needles in our parks. The police are receiving less calls to pick up needles. And, I don't think that's stopping the use of drugs. I think that we need to come back and make some of these things, the penalties heavier for them. 5 or 6 years ago, we also we eliminated certain things being felonies: possession of fentanyl, possession of heroin. Simple possession is now just a misdemeanor. If you come across somebody at an overdose and they have those drugs on them, there's essentially nothing we can do. If you see somebody with a needle in their arm at a park and they've injected themselves and we come across them, and that's a big complaint in my city. Why can't you do something about that? Well, there's no drugs in the needle. It's not illegal to be under the influence of drugs in the community. And that is, in my community, just a general nuisance. And if that person doesn't want help in the moment, which they don't, if they want help in Sanford, we're going to be the first person to bring them. If they wanted to go up to Milestone in Portland for detox, if they want to go to a recovery center, if you can find one, we'll take them there. We've proven to do that. We've done that. I've done that myself personally. But what about that person that doesn't want help, that just wants to wander around Maine communities with really no objective other than look for their next opportunity to use some drugs? How can we help that person? That's not healthy for them, and we're doing nothing for that person if we just wave to them and say, "Okay, we'll see you next time." I'm advocating for finding a way to get that person into some mandated treatment in some fashion, so they're not in our communities, and next time they might die. So by just letting them walk away, we're not doing any favors for them. And I've talked to many people that I personally helped, or people in recovery that have told me, jail saved their lives. Now, I'm not advocating for the jail to be the treatment center or the mental health facility, which often, unfortunately, it is in our community. But sometimes arrests do save people. Sometimes going to the jail is somebody's pathway to recovery. If a recovery person was sitting here, or specialist, they would tell you that there's many different pathways to recovery, which I do agree with. But one pathway is maybe through the jail or through the criminal justice system. And I know this because I know people that have personally told me their own story and said jail saved their lives. I was talking to somebody about this last night, actually. So I'm just asking that we continue to help people, but let's find a middle ground where the people in our communities that aren't doing anything, that are just going to work, that are making a living, some of them barely, but they're doing the right things day to day. They're not getting in trouble. Should they have to live in a community where that person that I just described has no consequences for their actions? And I don't believe they should. I want to give police officers tools to deal with that situation. And I'm not advocating for mass incarceration or mass arrests. You do have to trust your law enforcement. Maine is full of really good law enforcement officers. Honest, hardworking, non-corrupt law enforcement officers, in my opinion, of course. I know a lot of people, obviously, in my profession here. You have to trust your Maine law enforcement officers. We have some of the best training in the country, and we know how to handle these situations. It's like if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's a duck. So why can't we help that person that is essentially on the verge of something really bad happening? But right now we just have to walk away, and the citizen looking out the window and seeing that we let that person go is asking me in my office a lot of questions, and I have to explain that. So let's find a way to bring the law back to the middle and work together to find a solution for that.
So I guess what would that look like in terms of legislation and expanded policing power? I mean, is it a statute that allows you to take someone into protective custody if they're obviously intoxicated on fentanyl, or if they've been observed, injecting drugs, if they have fentanyl on their person? I know this was maybe 3 years ago or 4 years ago. They changed the possession with intent to distribute or the furnishing laws around fentanyl. They increased it to like 2 grams or something, which is depending on the purity, is a very, very large amount of fentanyl. And that was viewed by a lot of people in law enforcement as weakening your ability to combat drug trafficking and casual drug use. Is that something that the law needs to change, is to expand your ability to have discretion over whether or not you incarcerate someone who is very obviously high on drugs, using drugs, but doesn't have kilogram quantities on them?
Sure. I think it's got to go beyond the incarceration, or you mentioned protective custody. We have a really good protective custody law here in this state. But even if generally if somebody that maybe they've overdosed and we've used Narcan on them, or the rescue's used Narcan on them, they wake up, that's not a protective custody situation. I mean, they're now up, they're fine, they're on their way, because that's not going to work. Even if you tried, you would take them to the hospital and they would be released. We need to find a way to, that person that you described, if we could take them into protective custody, because that the next time could be the last time, and we take them to the hospital, how does that person get held in the hospital or mandate some type of treatment long term? I think that giving the police more power to make those decisions would save more lives. I also don't think we're going to arrest our way out of this. Somebody would maybe argue that I'm arguing for doing that. I'm not arguing for doing that. I don't believe in that. I'm actually a very big advocate for the recovery community. I've served on multiple boards for recovery. I was on the Maine Recovery Council. I served on the MAR board. I advocate for people in recovery. Most people, in my opinion, people that have called me, agree that that person needs help before they die. And the police just allowing them to go on their way and kind of go down and, next thing they're going to do is steal something from Cumberland Farms, or steal something from your local Walmart or whatever.
Or break into people's cars.
Break into somebody's cars, steal their pocket change in their car. How do you stop that? We encounter that every day in law enforcement. That is almost like a nuisance call. And our police officers, how many calls of nuisance can they handle before they get frustrated? Especially when they either, we do have protocols that we always offer somebody resources every time, even if it's the 100th time of them saying no, we still offer it to them. So, let's say that we've offered resources. No. Okay. We send them on their way, and then they walk down the street, they break into somebody's car and they steal their change. Well, okay. We write you a summons. We work a scale on the way up. We don't take everybody to jail. We don't have the police personally have the resources to do that, or tie an officer up for 2 hours to do that. But now we get to the point, we take them to the jail and they're out the next day. I mentioned in my op-ed bail conditions, and I was actually at the 4th of July parade this past weekend, and I asked one of our officers, and one of my local politicians was there with me, hey, Sergeant, what's the most bail conditions you've ever seen on somebody? And he said 23. I mentioned in my op-ed,
That's impressive.
I think I said 10 to 15 or something like that, but 23 sets of bail conditions. So what is the point?
So explain to someone who's unfamiliar with policing, what does that mean?
So when we arrest somebody, we take them to jail, and they have a right to bail, and they see a bail commissioner. Most of the time, if somebody doesn't have financial means or a low-level crime, we're not going to hold somebody in jail for stealing a candy bar from your local store for a long time. So they'll let them out the next day on bail conditions. Just the standard bail conditions are, the first one is you can't commit any more crimes. If you get arrested for drug possession or for alcohol or whatever it might be, or maybe you get trespassed from the store you stole it from, there can be other things in your conditions. But whenever you get released, you are going to get the standard 3, which one of them is don't commit any more crimes.
Yeah.
It's pretty obvious,
Yeah.
right? So that means then they come back out in the public the next day, and then they're wandering around again, and there's another opportunity in another unlocked car, and there's some change there. And let's say they steal that. Okay, they're arrested again. They're brought to the jail again. They're bailed again. So in my world, when we encounter somebody and we run them in our system, you can see how many sets of bail conditions they got. And this one officer told me 23 sets. So that means they've gone before a bail commissioner 23 times. And on that 23rd time, they've been arrested 22 other times and let go. When does that stop? When do we stop just letting people go?
Is there actually a limit Is there a,
Well, as far as I know, the limit's 23.
Is there a theoretical maximum to the number of
I don't
times
know.
you
I
can
don't
get
think
released
so.
like
I think
that?
the limit should be, maybe, I don't know what the limit should be, but it shouldn't be 23.
I mean, I've seen some analysis in other larger cities that show the number of if you took the 5% of the population who are committing, say, 3 or more crimes, you could reduce crime by, if you took them out of the equation, you could reduce crime by like 99%, because there's a small population that's responsible for the vast majority of crime.
Exactly.
That's something it seems like maybe Giuliani's New York City started to do and had some impressive results with that, but it's a philosophy that we've gotten away with the I guess restorative justice model.
Sure.
But on the bail conditions, so you talked about the bail commissioner. Does the bail commissioner, when they're for the 23rd time giving bail conditions to this person and releasing them on, $100 bail or personal recognizance, which is $0 bail.
Sure.
Do they know, do they see in front of them the other bail conditions they've imposed that have been ignored?
I would hope that the officer's report indicates that, and they have all the information available to them. There's, when you take somebody to jail and you drop them off, there's a form you fill out, and you can list all that there. If they haven't listed it there, it's obviously on the officer, and that would be our fault. But I think most officers are certainly letting bail commissioners know that how many times they've been charged for this thing. Now,
and is this the same in every county? The bail commissioner system?
Yes, the bail law in the entire state of Maine is the same. It's no different from county to county.
And who chooses the bail commissioners?
I'm not really sure, to be honest with you. They're.
I'm just saying, I've had reports from multiple counties of this exact same thing.
Yeah.
So this is not this is not a unique problem to Sanford or to cities or any area of Maine. Every area of Maine is experiencing the same problem with hyper recidivism and bail conditions that very clearly aren't working. So. Why aren't we asking bail commissioners questions? Why aren't we imposing new rules or demands on them? Why aren't we publicizing their names and shaming them, frankly, for not effectively doing their jobs? Why are they letting people off with these light bail restrictions or light bail amounts?
This is bail should be the same for everybody that commits the crime. We have bail code in the state of Maine. I'm not super familiar with it because I'm not a bail commissioner, but they probably have a set of rules that they have to follow, and I would guess their hands are tied in many things. I know that there's certain things they can't bail people for, and there's certain things that they can, but they have to consider, the severity, the amount of the bail, and whether they can release somebody on PR. I'm not sure if it's so much a bail commissioner. They're probably doing the work as they should, as it is a bail code issue in our statutes. I think that, another piece to this too is they if they see a judge or they speak to the attorney of the day, or they go before a judge when they do their arraignments, at what point are we holding them accountable at that point? Our district attorney's office, I'm sure, is very understaffed, just like everybody is nowadays. A lot of plea bargains are reached. They're not going to hold somebody that's, stole something from a store or from a car. That person's not going to be held in jail for a long period of time. But at some point, when do we hold that person in jail when they're just a complete nuisance to society? And I think that we need to figure that out, because other citizens, like I said, that are just going to work every day, their expectation is that person's not roaming the community doing that. So, and their expectation is that the police are doing their job and seeing that that's not happening. And our officers, the officers that work in my department, are getting very frustrated with taking people to jail for the 23rd time and then being released on bail conditions, or nothing's happening when it comes time to sentence people. Now, these aren't crimes of the century here, but there needs to be some elevated consequence that would maybe make somebody think twice before they do something that they shouldn't be doing. And like I think you said that, most of the crimes are being committed by a small group of people. And I could probably, off the top of my head, tell you 10 people in the city of Sanford that are, doing things they shouldn't be doing constantly all the time. Most citizens aren't. Most citizens are really good. They're doing everything they're supposed to do. They're really supportive of their police department. That's what I'm finding in my world of social media. It's that small group of people that are causing problems in communities, and unfortunately, it's related to either mental health or substance use disorder, maybe some, and also homelessness. And we need to find a way to tackle really those three subjects to, one, help those people get whatever treatment they need or get them on a pathway to be housed. I mean, this is a whole nother topic, the housing crisis in Maine. I mean, it's obviously a problem. But your police are the first person to encounter everybody. And it's just the way it is. We're out there 24 hours a day. Your fire department's not encountering people all the time. Your public works is not. We're out there working all the time, all night, seeing that person sleeping under that bush. And right now, we have limited tools on how to address that issue. It's not illegal to be homeless. I'm not saying it should be. But it should be illegal to shoot up drugs in your local parks. And the police should be able to do something about that. If we just did that, I mean, that right there would save, I think, a lot of phone calls to my office.
Well, I think it would be. It's shocking. It'll be shocking to people who aren't familiar with Maine cities, and it would be shocking to somebody, 15, 20 years ago, to know that it's not illegal to use narcotics in public parks where children play in Maine. The cops aren't going to be able to arrest you if you're using heroin or fentanyl on a playground in Maine.
Yeah, I mean, if you're in possession of, if you find somebody in possession in a playground in Maine.
If you find them at the exact right time.
Exactly.
And they have a big enough quantity.
And it's a misdemeanor. Yeah. Of course, it's a crime committed in your presence. Yeah, they can be arrested. I'm talking about the person that, like I said, they're under the influence of drugs.
Yeah. They're pushing their shopping cart in the middle of the park.
They look terrible. And I want to help that person. I don't want to arrest. I don't want to take that person's freedom away. I want to get that person on the right path to their recovery. So what can we do to that person that stole the shopping cart you're talking about? And, obviously is struggling in their lives, and they have 10 sets of bail conditions, and they're walking around with essentially no purpose. How can we help that person that is committing, that small amount of people that are committing these crimes in our communities? We can address all the other crimes. That's no problem. If it's that population of people that need our attention. And I mean, I got into this profession to help people. I didn't never get into it to arrest people. I mean, even as a little kid, why do you want to be a cop? I want to help people, right? Most police officers are going to tell you that. And I decided about, 7, 8, 9 years ago, whenever it was, that this population of people needed help. And that's why I got into community outreach. And that's why I worked for our mental health unit. That's why I started a mental health unit, because with this group of people needs our help. And we're not helping them by just letting them exist with no recourse to no consequences to the actions that they're doing every day.
How does someone fund that lifestyle? If you're not working, if you're every day, I mean, I guess my understanding is, a daily fentanyl user, if they're not using, has symptoms that are like the worst hangover or the worst flu you've ever had.
Exactly.
And it's until they get more drugs in their system, that's how they're going to feel. So that's the only thing on their mind while they're withdrawing. They're not working. How are they coming by the money to sustain that habit? Presumably, they still have to eat.
Yeah.
A man cannot survive on fentanyl alone.
I think they're funding it through trafficking themselves. I've seen that personally, where somebody is, engaging in prostitution to make some extra money. I think that, they're holding a sign at an intersection and people are driving by and giving them money. There's plenty of resources. If you're in Sanford and you need food or clothes, we'll clothe you. They'll be fed through just local nonprofits, through churches. We have those all over the place. Nobody's going to go hungry. As you know, shelter right now is difficult because the York County shelter closed. So the shelter now is in Biddeford, and that is probably full most of the time with just Biddeford residents. But that is the York County shelter now.
Well, I was just wondering, where they come up with the money.
Oh,
there.
yeah, the money. It
seems that, basically there's other crimes that are being done in order to fund the crime of drug use and drug trafficking.
Theft.
Yeah.
I mean, you steal bottles out of the clink.
Yeah.
You turn them in someplace else. So, theft from vehicles, theft from, theft from anywhere. And, you could sell it whatever way, pawn shop or something like that. Definitely through being trafficked or, prostitution, and definitely through holding a sign on the side of the road and just collecting money that way. You can collect quite a bit of money by holding the sign. I see it all the time. And we make contact with those people and they don't want any help. What does that tell you? That's frustrating for all the communities are seeing that happen. When somebody's holding a sign, you say, I can help you. Do you want to get off the street? And when the York County shelter was open, it would take, I think the fastest I saw it was like 128 days if you brought somebody to the shelter. And they got housed within about 128 days when I was doing outreach. That's pretty good. But of course, you got to go up there. You had to obey rules. You couldn't use drugs. And most people would leave. There's a pathway to being housed in the state. You just need to be willing to travel the road.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like successful recovery requires divine intervention and some serious willpower on the part of the individual.
I'm not saying it's easy because I'm not in recovery. I'm just consider myself an ally of recovery, but I'm not saying it's easy. I equate it to my own addiction to sugar, like Dad asked me to stop eating sugar and it's like, oh, I'll try, but it's hard. I can only imagine what it's like because it actually affects your brain more.
You're fitting in too easily to the cop donut.
Yeah, no, trust me. I'm actually I have a donut eating competition coming up at our local donut shop, so I fit pretty good into that.
So I guess the other side of the drug trafficking equation from a law enforcement perspective is the supply. Right. I mean, as far as I know, there's no fentanyl super labs in Maine. From what we've been able to learn publicly, there are fentanyl super labs on the Canadian side of the U.S. border, on the Mexican side of the U.S. border. There being, elements in China are supplying pill presses and fentanyl precursors to the labs, and Mexican cartels and some other criminal groups are making the fentanyl and distributing it throughout the United States. So what kind of groups or cartels are profiting from the fentanyl that is coming in and having all of these consequences for Maine's communities? That's
probably way outside of my lane. I focus on local enforcement. We have 2 people in Maine drug enforcement from my agency. And we have that relationship with them because we want to combat drugs in the city of Sanford. Sometimes we get unique. I'll do anything to shut down a drug house, to, a codes violation, any means possible within, legal authority. It's not necessarily, buys into a place. And we've done that just recently. For us,
what do you mean by a drug house? Is this somewhere where drugs are being sold out of?
Yes. So say we have a known location in our city where we know drugs are being sold out of, and it's we get calls. It's clearly obvious. Somebody who lives next door sees it all the time. So we'll make our officers aware of that. We can stop cars leaving the residence. We can find ways to get a search warrant for the residents. But these aren't, drug dealers that are living large on life. These are people that are just selling drugs to also either support their own habit or, survive their own life and pay their own bills and whatever it is that they're using their money for. So we on a local level, that's kind of what we focus on. Maine Drug does a really good job with, developing, CIs to get into places and stuff like that. And we support them the best they can. As far as, most of our drugs are probably coming up from Massachusetts and, Lowell, Lawrence, places like that. But, beyond that is outside of my knowledge.
Are you allowed to profile a Massachusetts license plate? I know there's a strong, no, you can't.
We're not allowed to profile at all.
No, I know you're not allowed to profile based on, the national origin, ethnicity, race, whatever, but not even a Massachusetts license plate.
Yeah, I mean, it's
Massachusetts license plates. I think we should legalize that in New York. I mean, New York, Massachusetts license plate.
Up here in Augusta, you may not see a lot of those, but in Sanford, I mean, it's very common with people coming up to the lakes and stuff. So.
Well, I would say if you're in Somerset or Penobscot County and you see a Massachusetts or a New York license plate, 99% of the time it's going to be.
I mean, we look for key indicators in vehicles. Obviously, it's police officers have a keen sense of when something doesn't belong, right? So. We certainly will clue in on those things and, make traffic stops based on, violations of the law. But most of the time we know, all the time, we know where these drugs are being sold from, and we do focus our activity on that. Now, I get this from the community a lot, like, why don't you just shut that house down? Well, it takes a lot of work. You don't. Well,
you have to balance people's
overnight.
Rights. You have to balance people's rights.
Exactly. You can't
individual
just
liberty.
Kick in a door. You can't. Exactly. So we do protect. We honor the Constitution and the laws of the state of Maine and work within them. And it takes time. So I see citizens often getting frustrated with that amount of time it takes, but they also get. They're very pleased when the house is, shut down, and it's you're often just chasing it around town. All those people that that are let out the next day are now someplace else doing it. So we just do the best we can with the limited resources we have. I mean, we don't have a drug unit at the Sanford Police Department. We have people in Maine Drug, and we have officers that are really interested in stopping cars that are drug related, and they don't want it. Many of our officers are residents of the community, just like me. I mean, I live in Sanford, and we don't want that in our community. So they take a lot of ownership in seeing that doesn't happen.
One of the biggest pieces of legislation that came through the most recent session, and you touched on this a little bit in your op-ed as well, was related to police agencies in Maine and their ability to cooperate with what they defined as immigration agencies or immigration enforcement agencies. Broadly, it's the agencies that work under the Department of Homeland Security, so Customs and Border Protection, Immigrations and Customs Enforcement, ICRO. It's kind of it was Maine Democrats responding to President Trump's immigration policy of deporting illegal immigrants. There was an illegal immigration crisis, or has been a rolling one for probably 2 decades, but particularly under President Biden, the southern border was wide open, and we're still dealing with the consequences of that. The ACLU, I'm told, wrote this bill. And in their testimony in favor of it, they said that it was about combating Trump's campaign of terrorizing migrants, and the necessary inference you can draw from that is that the local police are agents of terrorizing migrants and need to be stopped with this law from terrorizing migrants. That's the presumption, right? If you think about it, they might not have come out and said it, but the lawmakers who are supporting this provision believe that police in Maine are, racist tools of xenophobic, nativist policies. So I guess what's your take on this new law, which I guess the governor has she'll be making a decision I guess she could sign it, or she could allow it to become law. She could veto it when the legislature comes back into session. So it's kind of hanging in the balance right now. But what, as somebody who's been on the front lines as a police officer, someone who's a police chief now, and presumably deals with non-citizen populations, what is your take on these proposed restrictions on your ability to interact with federal immigration agencies?
Yeah, I'm not a proponent of, you're talking about LD 1971, and I don't support that legislation. As somebody that, has worked with federal agencies for, a long time, with FBI, ATF, the Marshals. I mean, I've worked at all of them. When I was a detective, I was a detective for 8 years in the city of Sanford, and, developed a lot of good relationships with the individual agents, and see the value in cooperating with federal agencies for local law enforcement, because we can't do it all by ourselves. We don't have the resources. I just graduated a couple years ago from the FBI National Academy, and that's the whole point of the academy, is to develop those resources with your federal partners so you guys can work together to combat whatever type of crime it is. So I see the LD 1971 as just unnecessary. Maine law enforcement officers are not arresting or targeting immigrants for arrest, for deportation. And I guess I can only speak for my city on this, but I believe it is statewide. It's not who we are. We arrest people based on the crime they're committing, based on whether they have a warrant. We don't search places without a search warrant. In my city, if Immigrations and Customs came and they needed to arrest somebody, we would just be a supporting agent. Our officers wouldn't be kicking in doors or putting handcuffs on people. We would just be there as a presence so that our local community would know that this is a legitimate operation, and, there's a Sanford police car, and it's just not some unknown person making an arrest. Local departments always get contacted by federal agencies if they're operating in your community. There's no clandestine operations or secret missions that any of these agencies are doing. We know all the agents, we know all the supervisors and all the federal agencies, and it's just important that we work with them and that we communicate with them, because nobody can accomplish anything by themselves is probably the best way to put it. And by limiting our ability to work with federal agencies, you would also be, I think, endangering the welfare of the people of our state, because we count on them for, analysis, for, maybe their crime lab, if it's something that, maybe it's a big case, and maybe for their intelligence. And, it's just important to have that partnership. So I would urge the governor to veto that and send it back to the legislature and see if they have the votes to make it law. They definitely don't.
No, they definitely don't. No, if she vetoes it, she kills it. I mean, she has the authority to do that. And, traditionally, I think that she's been viewed as pro law enforcement. Despite being in a part of the Black Lives Matter party, the party that's, I think, unfairly vilified law enforcement, she's been seen as countering that streak. But she's also in an ego fight with President Trump, and this could be seen as striking a blow against one of Trump's major initiatives. But there's no question that she has. She holds the fate of this law in her hands.
She does. And I would hope that, you mentioned the word ego, and he was associated with President Trump, but every person has an ego.
Oh, for sure.
Certainly the governor has one, and I have one, and you have one. But
my ego is legendarily very large.
You just need the ability to check that, and you have to really think about it. I hope that, I do think she's been supportive of law enforcement, and I would hope that she would listen to her law enforcement partners and make a decision based on the totality of that information and not in relation to Washington. This is a bad bill. It's a bad idea, and she should strike it down.
Can you give us like a practical example of how it would change the conduct of police officers if this becomes law? Like, say there's a traffic stop and it's filled with foreign nationals who can't produce American identity documents and don't speak English. Can you just walk us through like what would happen now in a period where you can cooperate with your local CBP or ICE official versus what would happen in that instance afterwards?
Now we would just contact our federal partners and run some names by them and see if there are any watch lists or anything of that nature. If this passes, that would probably have to stop. And let's face it, we're not out of the realm of terrorism in the United States by any means. And to say that, this can't happen in Maine is, in my opinion, naive.
Well, I mean, the 9/11 traffickers came. It was
through
stated,
Portland, right? So through Portland to Boston. So
we just had, we've had Jordanian nationals and Algerian nationals and Romanian nationals and Chinese nationals with ties to transnational criminal organizations come through the northeast border.
Right.
So we know what's happening.
Wouldn't you like your, our border agencies? Now you're really testing my Maine geography. What is it? Fairfield? Fort Fairfield. Wouldn't you like them to be able to partner with Border Patrol up in that way to share information if they stop a car? Those are probably the agencies that are going to encounter this more than the Sanford Police Department. We have new Mainers in Sanford, and honestly, the new Mainers are good community members. They're productive.
You're talking about the primarily Angolan and Congolese.
They came to Sanford a couple years ago. I was working that day. I mean, it was chaotic that first day.
There was some white ladies who went into the Portland Expo and paid for Ubers to bring them to Sanford.
I'm going to leave that one alone. But
I'm not leaving it alone. They said, "Oh, things will be better for you in Sanford," and gave you guys no forewarning whatsoever.
We saw that happen
because they wanted to help.
We had 100, 200 people there. Yeah, and I was working, and we as a city handled that, I think, very well because it was chaotic. You really had to be there. But that group of people in my community is not at all a problem.
Well, they're not using fentanyl.
Yeah, we don't have. They go to work. They're kind to the community. They're kind to the police. So I think the group that that you're talking about is people that are committing crimes in the United States, and that's certainly the group the president's talking about. And it doesn't matter to me if you're a new Mainer or an old Mainer. If you're committing crimes in the United States, then there should be consequences to that. If you're here illegally and you're committing crimes, well, wouldn't you think that we as the police would want to contact our federal partners to let them know that? And basically 1971 is going to tell us we can't do that.
Do you have multilingual officers on staff, like Spanish, Portuguese speaking officers?
We do not.
So I guess I'm curious how even in a practical sense, if the driver of a vehicle is exhibiting, some of the signs, there's, charboys in plain view, drug paraphernalia, whatever, and you're conducting a traffic stop and there's just no ability to communicate because the individual is Portuguese speaking or Spanish speaking. How do you even proceed without being able to contact?
Well, it's
federal
challenging.
authorities.
You contact, we have a language line that our officers use. We do encounter that situation just in everyday complaint taking.
Okay.
We do have a language line. I personally have a couple people in my phone that I've used since that first day in Sanford that I'm become friends with, and I can call them at any time. I just put them on the phone and they help me work through it.
And that can still be admissible in...
Yeah, I don't. That hasn't been that hasn't happened yet.
Okay,
but yeah, of course, I don't know what they're saying. I can only trust that they're relaying my message.
I'm familiar with some cases where, like with the Chinese marijuana growers, cases are thrown out because they used a Mandarin translator instead of a Cantonese translator.
I think if you're using it for criminal activity, probably the language line, just because that is a vetted organization.
Yeah.
And but we've worked through that as an agency and met those challenges, and I think that did a really good job of them. Just think that you shouldn't limit. You should trust your Maine police officers. it's a small community of people. We don't have a lot of police officers in this state. I think we're, 2,400 officers, and mostly all homegrown. I'm from Maine. I'm sure there's some people from I know there's some people from other areas, but it's still a small community. We're a small community of people in general in the state of Maine. What do we have? What's our population? 1.3 million, 1.4 million now. So, that's nothing. And, everybody knows their neighbor, and everybody, I try to let everybody know I want everybody to know their local police officers, and you gotta trust in that. So to make this bill and make it mandatory that we can't talk to federal partners just seems asinine to me.
One other piece of legislation, I guess this is going to be a ballot initiative, but it was before the legislature. There's a lot of controversy over whether they were going to hold this hearing or not over the red flag, is what it's commonly called. It's an order that would allow for law enforcement or force law enforcement to go seize firearms from somebody without having any form of due process. Supporters say that this is a necessary gun control that's going to protect people. Critics of the law say that we have an existing yellow flag statute that was developed as a compromise between Second Amendment advocates and people who want gun safety legislation. And then the Lewiston mass shooting happened. The yellow flag law could have been used in that instance, was not used, but the situation is nonetheless being leveraged, I think, in a way that's pretty grotesque by gun control advocates to support this red flag initiative. At that hearing, Maine State Police Lieutenant Michael Johnston gave 45 minutes of testimony. He's the individual who trains law enforcement in the state on how to apply the yellow flag law, and presumably would be the person who trains police on how to enforce a red flag law if this initiative does pass. He's strongly opposed to it. And, for the Maine State Police to come out and testify against a piece of legislation is very significant. Speaks for, I think, the governor, speaks for, law enforcement broadly. And he has concerns that, basically his testimony summed up is this law is going to have the exact harms the supporters say it's intended to mitigate. It's going to make it more dangerous for domestic abuse victims. It's going to make it more dangerous for police. It's going to make it more dangerous for people suffering mental health issues. What is your perspective at a local level on both the yellow flag law and the proposed red flag law?
Sure. I think the yellow flag law works. Lieutenant Colleen Adams in my department is actually one of the state leaders in yellow flag as well. And we used it even prior to Lewiston a lot. And since then, we were actually one of the leaders in initiating a yellow flag. The issue I see with the red flag, and I agree with the Maine State Police here, is that's going to allow the citizen to make the petition. So you have a family member that you think their weapons should be taken away. You can make the petition. Now, who holds you accountable is kind of the question I have. Who knows if you're telling the truth?
So you're saying that the person who submits a request for a red flag petition, what are the consequences for lying?
Exactly. Or see, so for yellow flag, the police are making the petition, right? We've taken an oath not to do that. We've sworn to tell the truth and to, find the probable cause necessary to take away somebody's guns.
And you can get giglioed if you're caught lying.
Exactly. So if John Smith wants his uncle not to have these weapons anymore, for whatever reason it might be, my concern is John Smith telling the truth in his petition? And I'm sure if this gets passed, we're going to see instances where people weren't truthful. What are the consequences around that? But even before that, why would we even allow that to happen? Again, it goes back to trusting your Maine law enforcement officers. The yellow flag isn't broken. And if it's not broken, then, some would say don't fix it. We've used yellow flag. I get the emails every week. I don't know how many it's up to now, but it's a lot. Maine law.
Well, there's a lot better awareness.
Yeah,
I think
lot more
post
awareness. Post Lewiston, a lot more awareness, and it's now just common in law enforcement. That if you have the situation, then you do it. At least it is in my department, and we because we don't want to miss one. We don't want to be that story that we missed one and something really bad happened. So we take great pride in doing things correctly, but at the same time, you have to make sure that you have to be honest. When you develop your probable cause, you have to, make sure it's accurate and it's the truth. And I don't think John Q. Citizen necessarily is trained in those things, or has to tell the truth, or has consequences if they don't. Police officers, if they're dishonest, like you said, they will lose their job. If you lie, you're out. You're done. There's no room for liars.
If you're caught lying.
If you're caught lying, right? In my opinion, if you lie, or especially if you're caught lying, you have no business working in police work at all. So, I just think that the Maine State Police were right in their testimony, and that I don't know. We'll see, because it's going to be on the ballot, right, in November. So,
yeah. What about I know that we have there's lots of petty neighbor versus neighbor, Hatfield and McCoy type feuds where someone can call in a complaint,
you
a
don't
red
say.
flag complaint.
I've never seen that.
Yeah, that can happen, but you could also see the political weaponization of it. Somebody shows up at a school board meeting and it gets a little rowdy. We've seen that very often right in this town, in Augusta, at the school board. There are complaints there. I think school board meetings now have police police details pretty regularly now. What happens if someone is red flagged over political speech? To my knowledge, there aren't any consequences for a false red flag or a red flag petition that has negative, unintended consequences. And I also know David Trahan, the director of the Sportsmen's Alliance of Maine, has brought up a case in Florida. In one county in Florida, there's a sheriff who's used a red flag law against middle schoolers who get in playground disputes. He's hundreds of times. And because of Florida's public records laws, those will be on their record for their entire lives. If someone pulls a background check on them for a job or something, they'll see that they were red flagged when they were, in sixth grade or something, and got in a playground fight and said, "I'm going to kill you," or just playground bully stuff. So I think there are unintended consequences from it, but I'm more worried about the political aspect of it.
Yeah, I just think if you leave it in the hands of the professionals, the law enforcement officers, to make the right decisions. And of course, we're not the final decision. It's going to, a judge signs off on this. So, but we provide the initial information. And I think that judge, my experience is, especially when you get relationships with your justices, your judges, and they get to know you, and they've read many of your cases, and they trust your work is accurate, they can feel confident signing that order from us. I don't know if that confidence would exist if they had to, sign, every citizen raised petition. The situation you described, that honestly doesn't even pass a straight face test in my opinion, but I don't really know anything about it. It's the first I've heard of that, but that doesn't seem right.
Well, it's definitely happened, but one other thing I wanted to ask you about before we wrap up is, we talked about the criminal justice system being understaffed. The DA's office is short-staffed. The court system is short-staffed. A lot of businesses in Maine are short-staffed. But I wonder, are some of the property crime and the quality of life crime that we're seeing as a result of the drug epidemic and the restrictions placed on law enforcement becoming a little bit of a factor in not being able to bring people to Maine to fill those jobs? Maine is supposed to be the way life should be, but if we're allowing all of these quality of life crimes to undermine the quality of life here in the state of Maine, are we discouraging people from moving here to take those jobs? Have we entered, I guess, maybe a self-reinforcing, negative feedback loop of deterioration where, because we're not able to enforce the laws, we're lowering the quality of life, and people who could be working in the criminal justice system aren't willing to move to Maine, and because they're not willing to move to Maine, we're not able to effectively enforce our laws. If that's a kind of complicated question.
That's a big question, but
are we at like, I guess, the event horizon of being sucked into a black hole of just a lawless shithole, for lack of a better term?
I mean, we're in a very peculiar spot regarding law enforcement recruitment and retention in the state of Maine. It is very hard right now to find, law enforcement officers. We haven't lowered our standards in this state, so it still takes quite a bit to, you got to pass a polygraph, you got to pass a psychological test, you got to pass a very stringent background test, and then nationally, when we see the scrutiny of law enforcement, sometimes justified, but sometimes maybe not, because people don't understand. We're asking 21, 22, 23-year-old kids to make split-second decisions. I mean, their brain's not even fully developed yet, and never make a mistake. So
and every time they walk up to a car, it could be the last time. Yeah,
and so you're asking these kids to come into this profession, be perfect, and work a 20-year career. I couldn't imagine the stress of that. I mean, when I started, I've been doing this since 93, full-time 25 years now, but I don't feel like there was that pressure not to make mistakes. Matter of fact, you knew that you were going to make mistakes. Your supervisors and your chief understood that perfection is impossible. But now kids are seeing, definitely through the media, that you almost have to be perfect. Not so much in our state. I think our state is very good in the treatment of law enforcement officers and understanding that, that small mistakes happen. Some mistakes are big, and of course, obviously, you can't recover from those. But again, you don't necessarily see those here, right? So back to your original question, it's hard enough to get law enforcement officers in the state of Maine. Never mind, you mentioned the quality of life, and we go. I've been over this, with my city leadership. Is like, how much do you share about your city? How much stuff? Because bad things happen in every jurisdiction, right? I'm sure Augusta made arrests this week that aren't favorable towards the city of Augusta. Sanford made them, Biddeford, Lewiston, all these places, right? But at what point are you oversaturating the public with bad information? So I really try to balance out at my department. It's a balance of good information and, because the public needs to know all the good things your police are doing and, how we're meeting our community and getting to know our community. But also our community wants to know what we're doing to protect them, to keep the city safe. And that requires them knowing that, somebody's been busted for drugs at this residence, or somebody's been, what other crimes, assault here or what have you. So it's just, I think it is a balance, because you don't want to deter people come. The state of Maine is beautiful, right? This is, in my opinion, the best state in the country. Of course, I'm biased. I've lived here my whole life, but I've been to a lot of places, and I mean, we have it really good here, and let's always remember that. But I also want more people to want to come work here. I want more kids to graduate from high school and want to be police officers.
What's the starting pay for a police officer at the Sanford Police Department?
A year?
Yeah.
It's probably up to about 70 now, $70,000 a year. 60s or 70s.
You think that's I'm not asking you to come up with median housing cost numbers right off the top of your head.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult.
That's the formula.
You need
right?
to have two. You got to have two incomes.
If you're a teacher and a cop,
you can survive.
Can you afford a median home in Sanford?
It's tough.
Increasingly, that's becoming not the case. I mean, there are people with much better paying jobs than public service jobs who are not able to afford the median family home.
And the problem is like I never got into this. I never got into this job for the money. For my whole career, I could never tell you how much I made an hour because it just wasn't on my radar. I got paid a fair amount of money to do this job, and I was always grateful and appreciated that. But I think now that is a factor, because you have to look at how much money are you making. Can you buy a house in Sanford that's $450,000 now for a basic house in Sanford? You're definitely going to have struggled to pay that on your own. And like you said, a teacher and a cop get together and try to raise a family, and it's questionably manageable, right? And police pay in Maine right now is, I think it's going up. The market is increasing, and that's because of the shortage of officers. Most departments in Maine, if not all, are police unions. So there's always competition from similar agencies and similar size, and just kind of always go up the scale. But you gotta meet the salary needs for this state, and also recognize that if you go down to Massachusetts, police officers are making $200,000 a year. So, not that it's any cheaper to live down there, because obviously it's not.
So, I guess are there any other issues in the city of Sanford that you think people should know about, that from a law enforcement perspective? We've talked about the drug crime, we've talked about the immigration and gun control, but are there aspects of policing in Sanford that you think residents, taxpayers, voters don't appreciate or don't see? Is there any unseen side of policing in Sanford that you would think deserves more visibility?
I think that and I'm not saying that people don't already know this. Some people do. But I don't think that people realize what is asked of their police officers nowadays. And we've kind of covered this a little bit. Whether they're responding to somebody experiencing homelessness, somebody with substance use disorder or alcohol use disorder, or a mental health issue, it's not as easy as it used to be. It's very gray all the time. And we demand a lot of our police officers. So you want them to respond to those calls. You also want them to stop cars. You also want them to be proactive to prevent crime. It's a lot. And we're asking our officers in this state to do this, while also most agencies understaffed or down on officers. I mean, we're down, I think, 3 officers right now at the Sanford Police Department, which I'm grateful for. That's absolutely amazing. There's other departments down 15, 20. I think Poland PD is down like 25, 30 officers. And they're finding it hard to fill their ranks. And it's not...
Just sorry to interrupt, but how do you set the number of police officers required for a community? Is that based on population of the community?
Yeah, it is based on population.
Okay.
I don't know the number off the top of my head, but it's so many per 1,000.
Okay.
So like my city has 23,000 people. We have 43 officers. We're understaffed. We should probably have like 53 officers. Biddeford, roughly the same size city, their full complement's probably around 50 something. So you have to also consider the income of your city. I mean, Sanford is not a wealthy community. I think we do really well with the resources that we have. I know the police department always has tried to do more with less. We created a mental health unit. We created a traffic unit. And we did that without increasing our staff. And of course, when you create something or you move a couple officers into a mental health unit, some other part of the agency is going to suffer, whether that be not as many traffic stops or not as many officers on the streets. And now officers are being forced to work because we have to fill the shifts, right? So officers are being ordered in. And that takes its toll on a person. You only can work so many hours. And of course, the current generation of officers, they don't work like I did. The older generation, we just overtime. Yeah, sign me up. We worked a lot. But now the quality of their life is more important than, working a bunch of overtime to make some money. And it's probably the way it should be, honestly. I mean, they should probably...
Except for those last 3 years.
Last 3 years,
the last 3 years.
The last 3 years, you should work
take as much overtime as you want.
Exactly.
Got to get those pension numbers up.
But I dare say that those last 3 years probably are not going to exist anymore. Just I've seen the young kids, they value their time off. They value time with their husbands or wives or girlfriends or partners. And, I can appreciate that because you do lose a lot in this job I miss my kids' games or events or Christmas or whatever it might be. You know, I did Christmas in uniform many of years because I went home and sat there while I was working, you know, because that's the best you could do. So, but now people want to take the day off to celebrate those things. And that's fair, but it's also really hard too when we don't have the numbers to support that commitment. And we have a very gracious time off policy at my department for, officer wellness. We didn't really talk about that, but the shift in making that a priority is important.
Well, if somebody wants to become a Sanford police officer, how do they get in touch with you?
Yeah.
Are you accepting applications?
Yes, I'm accepting. We've really taken a unique approach. I found, and we found, that our best recruiters are our officers. Anybody that works at our department is usually recommended through somebody else. And especially when I was the deputy chief, I really took time to meet with individuals and just talk to them for a couple hours. Last week, I still do it as a chief. Last week, I met with a candidate, before she even put her application in, for a couple hours, and just hung out, showed her around, told her what the department was about. That's you have to develop that type of connection or relationship with somebody they want to know the culture of your department, what's it like there, because they can go work at any department. When I got hired, 200 people for one job. But now it's, no people for 4 jobs. So when somebody comes to the door, they could go at any other department in York County or Cumberland or wherever, actually. So it's really it's a sell, and it has to be an honest sell because it'll show through real quick if they show up and it's not what you told them. So, we have our core values at our department, and we take a lot of pride in those, and that is the truth. And I usually just send the person walk in the hall, say, take a walk, talk, and I drop them off at another officer completely unexpected. And when that officer tells them the same thing I told them, that's when they know, oh, wow, he's not full of BS, he's telling the truth. And that's how we get people through the door. You call the agency and just ask to talk to me or anybody. All of us are the best recruiters.
Well, thank you very much, Chief Small. I appreciate you taking the time to come up and talk with us today. I'll have to have you back sometime.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Have a good day.